Hello, I'm Laura, and with me is Jeff, and welcome to our course, Introduction to Ethical Hacking. We have a series of modules that will teach you all about ethical hacking, rather, all that you need to manage. This is an introductory module, and in this module, we will be introducing you to various concepts on ethical hacking. We will be talking about vulnerabilities, exploits, defense strategy, penetration testing, and pen test types and methodology. We will also talk about vulnerability management, incident management, and security policy development.
Lots to talk about. Yeah,
Yes.
so this will be a really fun series of modules. You're going to hear the word hacking quite often, and you also, you've heard about ethical hacking among academic and IT departments perhaps. Let me start with briefly explaining the terms hacking and ethical hacking. Now, in most cases, it's about posting unwanted contents on websites, stealing data, etc. The moment we hear about ethical hacking, it implies that there is something unethical in hacking, right? You can't have one without the other. So you need to understand these two types of hacking. Now, conceptually, both are the same, but it is the intent that makes all the difference. So let me first explain to you the difference between them. In fact, I'll let you start it out, Laura.
Okay, I'll get it going. Now, hacking is the skill of exploring various security breaches. There are many hackers around the world, but only a few are well known. It is important to know that not all hackers are identical. Each hacker may have different motives, techniques, and abilities. Though we don't appreciate what they do, it is important to know about them, what they do, and how they do it. And hackers are curious about knowing new things, brave about taking steps, and are often very sharp-minded. Hacking is an art as well as a skill, and most people associate hacking with breaking the law, so those who engage in hacking activities are considered to be criminals. And why do we say this? It's because their intent is bad. They cause damage, loss, and a whole lot of things.
So, yeah, excellent setup. So let's go back to the definitions. Ethical hacking is testing the resources for a good cause and for the betterment of technology. Technically, ethical hacking means penetration testing. It's focused on securing and protecting IT systems. So in essence, ethical hacking focuses on performing security analysis. So ethical hackers carry out their job in a planned manner, looking for vulnerabilities and analyze the security preparedness of an organization to face or deal with security attacks. So let me reiterate that unethical hackers are malicious in intent, and they are threats to an organization's information security. They could be a threat to society at large as well, by definition.
Correct, yeah. And hacking concentrates on exploits and vulnerabilities. Now, what then is a vulnerability and what is an exploit? A vulnerability is a weak link in the software, settings, etc., through which, if not fixed early, someone can get access to the computer, application, and/or network and can cause damage. It could be software related, operating system related, through a third-party package installed, or a flaw in the network. Exploit code is written to exploit the weak link.
Right, and an exploit could be a piece of software, or it could be a technology. It could even be data that can impact the computer. The point is, it's capable of making use of a vulnerability to gain unauthorized access to a network or a computer. It could then cause denial of service, steal sensitive information, or cause temporary or even permanent damage, right? So hackers look for vulnerabilities so that they can gain entry into the system. Now, if the exploit is a software, how big do you think that would be? It's very normally a very small piece of code or script. Now, this code or script scans the computer and tries to identify vulnerabilities. Now, most often, Laura, hackers get code from others and experienced hackers create their own code. So do you think programming skills are really necessary to be a hacker? Not really, not at all. You have plenty of software with exploits available on the net and in the gray market, and you can use them without much help. It's not that hard at all.
Exactly. Now, attacks on a machine are often carried out via an exploit, and an attack occurs when a system is compromised based on a vulnerability. Hackers or hacking uses exploits to cripple a system, steal info, etc. What does ethical hacking do? Ethical hacking uses a plan and a set of tools based on the plan to identify vulnerable spots in the operating systems, third-party software, application software, network configuration, etc.
Right.
The intent is to recommend steps on how to prevent a hacking attack. Now, we hope you got a basic understanding of an exploit, a vulnerability, and an attack. Let's learn some more terms.
All right, here we go. So the basic tenets of information system security are confidentiality, integrity, and availability, sometimes known as the CIA triad. Now, we will explain more about this triad a little later. So, Laura, let's talk about 3 more key terms often used in hacking circles. Now, 2 of them were introduced previously. We've talked a little bit about them already. They're exploits and vulnerabilities. The last one is what we call zero-day attacks.
Right. Now, let me talk about an exploit again and add some more details.
Great.
An exploit can cause a damage or change the behavior of a computer. Now, changing the behavior of the computer could be done by inserting malicious code or changing data or taking control of the computer or any combination of these. Now, the outcome could be total non-functioning to malfunctioning to anything that we may not easily conceive.
Right. So the big question really is, how do exploits get into contact with the target? How does it all start? The exploit could come from a remote location, which is possible by making use of vulnerabilities in the security. Sometimes the exploit gets access by some means and then starts escalating its privileges more than what obviously an administrator would normally grant for that role. Now, there are many cases where applications are hit by exploits. Sometimes users will be redirected to a malicious server, or social media will be used to gain access to applications.
That's correct. And some exploits are classified by the action taken against the vulnerable system. What do you think is the action? Now, actions include unauthorized data access, arbitrary code execution, and denial of service. Exploits find their way into the system and then work their way to gain super user access.
Super.
Yes.
Now, we should note that exploits have defined purposes. In general, they are malicious in intent. So as soon as an exploit gets published, people work to fix the issue related to the vulnerability itself. So once a patch with a fix is available, almost all users apply the patch, make the exploit obsolete, and at least in their context, in their own little world. So some hackers don't publish their exploits, at least not until they are identified and a patch has been made available. Exploits that have not been published are called zero-day exploits. Now, naive hackers, if there is such a thing, try hard to get their hands on such exploits instead of writing their own, and these hackers often called script kiddies.
Script kiddies, interesting. Yeah. Now, let me explain further about vulnerability. Vulnerabilities could potentially be 1 or 2 or all of the 3 elements of the CIA triad. To impact, there must be a vulnerability, a way for the attacker to gain access through the vulnerability, and the ability for the attacker to exploit after gaining access. To be able to exploit a weakness, the attacker must have a tool or technique to attack a specific vulnerability. Right. And this vulnerability is also known as attack surface.
Vulnerability management is a continuous practice, right? It involves scanning for vulnerabilities, classifying them, putting steps in to remediate them, and then working to mitigate the risk due to vulnerabilities. So a vulnerability can pose a risk to the organization, and the organization works to remediate and or mitigate it. Now, if there is a mechanism to exploit a vulnerability, it is called an exploitable vulnerability. Makes sense. What then is a window of vulnerability? Well, it's the time from identifying a vulnerability till a patch or a solution has been identified or the attacker has been neutralized, and often those windows are very small.
That's correct. An exploit that is not known is a zero-day exploit. An attack by an unknown exploit, it's called a zero-day attack. The issue could be there as the developers could not address it for some reason. It is called zero-day as the developers don't have time to fix the vulnerability before the attack. They have not had time to get it ready before the attack, so they literally have zero time. However, they can work on it once they are aware of the attack and release a patch. Once you have a patch, it is no longer a zero-day exploit. Yeah. It so happens that once people find a zero-day attack, they normally inform the product company or government so that prerequisite steps can be initiated to prevent cyber warfare.